p.m.
Do that again, please.
Oh, sorry. So we'll call the meeting to order. It's 6:33 p.m. And well, the first order of business that we had was having our special guest, Costa Diamantis. He's the Office of School Construction Grants and Review Director. We will revisit once he jumps on. So I will skip down to the next item, which is chairperson report. I'm not sure if she hopped on yet, but we do plan on having a guest tonight from the Hall Foundation, Alice Caselles. Alice, are you on the phone yet?
Let's see here. Yeah.
So when she does come on, I just wanted to make an introduction to her. And for anybody else that, if this is your first time for the school building committee, if you have something you want to say, there is an opportunity at the end of the meeting under present to speak. So we will get to that at the end of the meeting. So if I don't think I have anything else other than the next item, which is approving the meeting minutes from May 19th. Do we have a motion on the table to approve the meeting minutes from May 19th School Building Committee?
So moved.
Erica?
I'll second. Ann Grosjean.
Thank you, Anne. All in favor or any discussion? Sorry. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Abstentions? Meeting minutes from the 19th are approved. Still moved and approved.
I'm not sure where this comes from. There we
There was a phone. Individual on the phone.
go. Can the person that's at the 428 number, can you just identify yourself, please? 860-428-1022. I'm going to mute you. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, Catherine. I think I muted you as well. Didn't
Okay.
need to do that.
So in case we missed that last part, the meeting minutes from May 19th are approved. Next item is communications. I think we're actually going to be going into our subcommittee communications committee, which they have a couple documents to share with us. So we're basically going to skip down, I believe, to old business 7.
Catherine, that communications piece for number 5 is if we were sent any emails or anything to this group, and I don't think we received anything.
No, there's nothing. The only thing we got was just a couple people couldn't make it to tonight's meeting.
Correct.
Yeah, so there's nothing to report on that one.
There's your guest
Perfect.
logging in now.
Okay, so we will hold off on item 6 for now. We can jump back up to item 2. Hi, Peter.
Hi, sorry, I was having a little trouble getting on.
Problem.
So
That's 2 of us. I had some trouble getting on as well. It's Costa Diamantis.
Hi, Costa. Thanks for joining.
yes, thank
Sure.
you for joining, Costa.
Sure.
So we'd like to welcome our guest this evening, Costa Diamantis. He's the Deputy Secretary for the Office of School and Policy Management and the Director of the Office of School Construction Grants and Review. His office is basically the gatekeeper for the school grant applications for all new school building projects, renovations, and capital projects. He visited Hall School with myself, Mr. Stevens, and First Select Woman Wachensky. I can never say your name right, Erica. I'm sorry.
Pretty good. That's all right.
On May 17th. He was invited to tour the buildings, both Hall and Center, to make observations of the physical buildings and to gather background information so he could provide guidance regarding the future of our buildings. During his visit, he offered to attend a meeting with the school building committee, and thank you for joining us tonight, and answer any questions. So we took him up on his offer. So our committee was asked in our last meeting to come up with some questions that they would like to ask Costa, and we'll also take questions after our building committee questions. And if you could just raise your hand, if you have the ability to raise your hand on the Zoom, that would be great. If you're on the phone, I will wait until we can answer the ones on the video call, and then I will call upon anybody on the phone that has any questions for Mr. Costa. So I'd like to just open it up to see what Mr. Costa, if you don't mind me calling you that, would you rather just call me Costa? If you would like to just tell us what
It's
you
Costa, that's my first name. Feel free to use
Okay. If you'd like to just talk briefly about your tour at Hall School with us and tell us what you thought about the building. And we gave you a little bit of feedback about the town of Willington and what we were trying to get some feedback about our schools and our program, and wanted to know what your first thoughts were.
Well, let me start off with, first of all, thank you for having me come visit your school in the first place. It's always nice to be proactive in the process, especially when a town is looking to renovate, build new, consolidate, all of the appropriate measures that need to be taken in the best interest of the town, the children, the taxpayers, and taking all of those things in consideration. Our office is one that is looking to partner with towns always. And at the same time, we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that we utilize taxpayer dollars effectively and efficiently. One of the things in our policy, of course, is we understand from all the superintendents across the state and across the country, Connecticut is part of the National Council of School Facilities, so it is an organization right now of about 32 states that talks about school facility education, educational specifications, how they're incorporated into the buildings, and of course, the cost of maintaining buildings. So I can say to you that Connecticut has a premier program, one that many states attempt to emulate. And part of our understanding in working with superintendents is there's always a critical mass in a school in order to have an effective learning environment and being able to effectively teach children based on whatever that program is. And we have learned that consistently, that critical mass is approximately 400 students in a school building for an educational program to be effective. Now, of course, 400 is that critical mass at the bottom end, obviously plus or minus a few students. But for all intensive purposes, what we understand now is critical is what do we do with schools that are housing 200 students or 250 students and 280? At some point, an investment for us into a school that only has a couple of hundred students in it, knowing that it's not an effective academic program, becomes a difficulty for us. And we, in fact, posture that when we see schools with numbers below the 400, we have to actually look at what are we going to do in that school district? What's the community looking to do in that school district? And how can we assist them? In your particular case, which is very similar to what was happening up in Manchester, I'm losing so many towns I've been to, in which we're consolidating 5 schools into 3, I think it was 2 up there, possibly 3, I think it was 2. And in your particular case, walking into your school, which was definitely dated and definitely needs some work. And looking at the size of the student body, I think it is a prime candidate for consolidation. Both your schools are aged that we were talking about. And, you know, if you're talking about a pre-K upward, you then have to consider the new building codes. Students need to be ground level, take all of those things into account. And by the way, I think many districts have learned what we've been preaching for a long time, and that is air quality, air circulation, and air quality are tied together. Windows and classrooms having windows. And I remember walking through the basement level, or I should say the walkout basement level of the school, with classrooms without windows or not enough. So clearly it is a school that for me would be troublesome to renovate. And certainly I think for the district would be troublesome to renovate, especially if we're talking about consolidation. I don't see that building being a consolidation candidate, given the age group of the students we're talking about. And my impression upon leaving, and my impression to the folks that escorted me around the building, was that I think you would need a new school based on the age group that we were talking about. So that was my quick analysis of the building and its needs, and then how it would conform to building codes today based on the age group. So that's a synopsis of my discussion.
Thank you very much. Phil, did you want to start off maybe with some specific questions? Do we want to center at all, or?
I think you just open it up to the committee. If there is anybody on the committee, that's what's on our agenda. If there's anybody on the committee that has a specific question for Costa, it's the time for it.
Okay, let's open it up to the committee. We'll go with the committee questions first. As I said, if you're on screen, if you could just raise your hand and I'll call upon you. And I'm not sure if people that are on Zoom have the ability to raise their hand if they're not on video. Can they do that?
Yeah, it's been disabled, so we cannot.
Erica, can you change that?
Yes.
Thank you. I think
Okay.
Ralph is the only one not on camera for committee members too, so.
Okay. Does anybody on the committee have any questions you want to get started with? I actually have a couple, if there isn't. Okay, Peter, sorry.
That's quite all right. Go ahead, Catherine. I'll go after you.
Okay. Well, I had some questions that were actually in our packet that I don't know that we've gotten any kind of response to. So Costa, this question is, if Willington,
I'm sorry, you're good.
okay. So Costa, if Willington continues to maintain the two school buildings, will the state reimbursement be impacted? Is there a maximum age of buildings or a recommended age of buildings before they are deemed not suitable for additional renovation reimbursement?
Renovation reimbursement as a school?
Yes,
Is that,
right. If we
so
continue,
in other words,
yeah, if we continue to maintain the two buildings as is. The buildings are, or at least Hall is 40 plus years. Is there a maximum age of the building where you guys just cut it off and say, if it's over 50 years old, we're not gonna fund?
no, that's not true.
Well, that was a question,
been-
yeah.
we have been in the business, we have renovated schools that are 100 years old. It is not based on the years, but it is based on the quality of the life that's left in the building and its usefulness, given what the intended future purpose is.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to go ahead with your question?
Sure. Thank you again, Mr. Costa, for joining us.
Sure.
My first question is, I'm sensing that you're more flexible than I was previously led to understand. And our committee wants to look at all options, whether they be new, renovated, a combination of renovation and expansion. I noticed a number of school projects your office is supervising are doing renovation expansions. And I guess the first question I'm asking is, as we evaluate all these possibilities and certainly taking into consideration some of your comments tonight about what you see in the building, are we closed off from any particular option when it comes to reimbursement, depending on our final conclusion as a committee in town?
There is nothing that is off the table with respect to reimbursement when it comes to a particular building that we, the town, and the Office of School Construction Grants and Review feel meets the educational requirements, building code requirements, and use of the building. So all of those factors come together, and at some point in time, I have to sign off on the suitability of the site, to include safety, of course, as well. And so we take all those factors into consideration. The ultimate decision of whether we go new or renovation, specifically new, honestly, because what we look to do is try to renovate buildings where we can so that the usefulness of the building continues on versus building new. And if we're going to go to a new, ultimately, our team, my team of architects, and some of the architects in my office are also inspectors, we make the ultimate decision that the usefulness of the building is not there and we need to build new, and we go along with the idea of building a new school. Hopefully that answers your question.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Now, I'd like to ask a question myself. What is the plan for the particular school that I visited? What age group are we talking about?
So the charge of this committee is to look at a pre-K through 8th grade building. And so just
All
like
right.
you said, the building of 200, we'd be looking to bring them all into one building.
Well, the building that I toured has a pre-K pre-K K1 has problems, many problems. So that building is starting behind the 8 ball at that age group. So I just want to throw that out there. Just from a code issue. But go ahead. Any other questions?
Yep, Ann Crosjean, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for joining us tonight. Have you also ruled out center school in terms of a renovation? I know you visited Hall and your comments tonight are directed at the inappropriateness of that building. Do you feel the same about center school also?
Based on the information I've been provided with respect to center school, age, size of the footprint, and what you're looking to accomplish, the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I jump in here at some point? I can't raise my hand because
That's okay. Ralph, is that you?
that is me.
Okay, I can't see you, but yes, go ahead.
All right, I have several questions, so I'm going to take them one at a time here. It's been our understanding that any new school must be on a site of 20 acres based on the population that we have.
Based on the age group of the,
K through
it's
8.
based on the, it's, yep.
Okay, we're told we have to have a site of at least 20 acres. Now, exactly how much of that 20 acres is to be utilized for the building and the associated outdoor infrastructure? And I'm talking about the school infrastructure, not the septic or well or anything else. So exactly how much of that 20 acres are we going to have to use?
Well, I guess that would depend on the design.
Right.
Okay,
I think our maximum reimbursement is around 65,000 square feet for 400 students.
so why are we chasing a 20-acre site?
It's based on the number of students, I believe, right, Phil?
Is
Oh, you were
correct.
I was just told it was
It
not.
is. It is based on a number of students.
Okay. So again, I ask how much of that 20 acres is to be utilized for this building and the recreation?
Ralph, he just answered the question, which was, it depends on the design. So basically,
Then the 20 acres would also depend on this design of the building.
no,
If
I
we
think,
were,
Let's back it up. Let me interject because I don't have my statistics with me as far as looking up our requirements, where there's a base number of acreage, and then anything above that number, you add a certain amount of acreage. I have not been asked to do a calculation, so I did not. But there is a specific number based on a pre-K through 8 that you would require. Whatever portion of the building would sit on, and the remaining portion would be utilized for athletic fields, etc.
and Ralph,
okay,
we can provide that to you separately. How about we go to the next question?
all right. Would an urban or suburban school have that same site size requirement?
Yes,
So even in the city of Hartford or
yes.
in Manchester, you would still
Yeah.
require 20 acres.
Well, you're saying 20. Again, I haven't done the calculation. I'll take your word for it.
That's that's what the committee's been told.
It comes up to 19 and something, so.
Again, I personally haven't done it. I'll trust the committee's
Right.
calculations because there are policies and they're black and white. But yes, it applies to everybody.
Okay, next question, Ralph.
Next question. Is there anything that would prohibit sharing a site with a independent municipal building?
No, as long as you have a 20-year lease and one that the lease ensures that the students have primary use during normal school hours and school activities.
So it would not be out of the question to separate and isolate the original 1922 Hall School from the rest of the school and reconfigure the remaining portions that would be utilized for the school. And we could get creative as far as additions and renovations. Is that a possibility?
Sure.
The original,
Out of the box and not knowing, I don't have a site plan. I'm not sure what that would look like. But is it a possibility? I can only assume yes.
okay, so that's not out of the question at this point. We would certainly have to isolate that original building from the school portion, just for security purposes, I'm sure. Where do we stand on the existing school roof projects as far as any grant money? Is that cleared or has that been frozen?
That is frozen. If we're not using the existing buildings for schools, I'm not going to use school construction money to put a roof on two buildings that are going to become municipal buildings and not school buildings.
So that's absolutely frozen. We're not going to do anything unless, well, that means we're going to have to build a new school.
No.
You're kind of backing us into a
Well,
corner there.
No, that's,
No,
Can I
that's
answer
not what,
that? Yeah.
that's not what I said. Let me be clear what I said. What I said was, if we're not going to use those two buildings as schools and they don't qualify to be utilized as schools because they don't meet the educational specifications of the district, whatever it is the superintendent, the Board of Ed, and others decide, then we will not use school construction money to put a roof on those two buildings. If in fact, those two buildings are going to be kept because in fact they do work, and that's the decision that we all make, then of course we're going to put roofs on them.
Okay, so we do have some leeway to think out of the box on this as far as the building and the site are concerned. Is that a fair statement?
Sure.
Okay,
Okay, Ralph, anything else? I'm gonna try
no,
to.
that'll be it. That's it for now.
Okay, thank you for your feedback. So I'm gonna jump in one question here and then we'll open it up to if any rest of the committee has any questions. And then we'll open it up to anybody else that's on the phone. So I just had a question about, does the state have any additional incentives to the districts to build new versus renovation? Like tax benefits or energy rebates or special grants for future education needs?
No. As far as energy is concerned, there are many communities that'll work out possible programs with whoever your energy providers are. And whatever rebates you get that are either short-term or long-term belong to the district, certainly, to your benefit.
Okay, thank you. All right, so last call on the school building committee, if we have any more questions. I'm gonna jump to Ann real quick. Go ahead, Ann.
Of our final dollar, whatever we decide to do and we have our final dollar, what percent is reimbursed by the state? So I know there's one.
Your reimbursement rate,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Willington's reimbursement rate, I'm not sure what your reimbursement rate is, but the reimbursement rate you have, if you were going to go new, it would subtract 10 points from that. Superintendent, what's your reimbursement rate?
Oh, 55, 65. 65 Reno,
50, you're
55 new.
Renovation.
so you're, and if you went new, you would be 55. Is that what you're telling me?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Now, there's the reason for the difference, just so we can elaborate on that, so folks understand.
Mhm.
In a renovation project, many times there are things that are not eligible for reimbursement when you're doing some renovation projects. And in a new project, most everything is considered eligible. And therefore the legislature, in its infinite wisdom back in 1995, felt that the differential was 10 points in the difference between eligibility of a renovation project and a new project. In my 6 years of heading school construction, it seems to bear itself out. So there really isn't, oh my God, I get more money if I renovate than if I build new. It really balances itself out.
Thank you.
Okay, Peter?
Just following up again on potential flexibility with our large hall school building. We just have a lot of space there is what I noticed in my walkthrough, which makes me think about our current school population and how we're kind of on the cusp of what you were talking about at about 400 students. Is it common or uncommon for school districts to take a building like that, which right now, the 1922 portion of the facility, from what I observed in my tour, is primarily administrative and special function. There's no classrooms in it. Could that serve that purpose? Could we keep some of that classroom capacity with upgrades and ventilation and windows, and then add space for the younger segment of the population that's more age appropriate and kind of have our cake and eat it too, if you will? Is that something do or don't do in your experience?
Peter, are you saying an addition, like put an addition on?
Yes, I'm saying renovation and expansion, essentially, kind of a hybrid project.
But keep in mind that if you're looking to renovate the entire building without any demolition and do an addition to it creates a space standard issue for you. So that if your space exceeds the allowable space based on your student population, that additional space above and beyond is not eligible for reimbursement. So you will be renovating it at your own expense at 100%.
Huh. Can you keep portions like that and not renovate it for future flexibility and just confine the scope of the project to what is reimbursable based on our current school population, but keep that capacity, if you will, for the future? Uh-oh.
You got muted somehow. There we go.
Somehow, fact. I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question. I apologize. I don't know what happened.
I was kind of following up based on your response. Can you focus your reimbursable dollars on the allowable square footage for renovation and expansion, and then keep, say, a wing of classrooms that we don't modify or modify at our own expense for a future expansion if we have a large increase in population, especially given our proximity to Yukon?
You know, without doing the math and seeing what it looks like, I mean, could you? I suppose you could. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know if it's reasonable. I don't know if it's rational. I don't know. Without seeing it, the hypothetical for me is unclear. So I don't want to say no, but I don't want to say yes either.
Fair enough. I was just curious if that's ever like done, you know, in other districts.
There are districts that have, I can tell you, Farmington High School, they have their old building that is from the 1920s, and it's in their minds historic, and it's historic to the district, but not literally historic on one of the indexes. But they are keeping it for Board of Ed purposes. They're tying some of their alternative ed program to it, but they are building a new high school. So, but that was one way to make use of a very important part of their community and getting some bang for their buck. But on the Board of Ed portion of it that they're using it for offices, it is half of the reimbursement that ordinarily would be for a school by statute.
Can there ever be a mixture of town and school use in that administrative type space?
No, not for school purposes. No, we are not sympathetic to the municipal side. It's only the educational side. For the Board of Ed, yes, at 50%. Municipal purposes, none.
Understood.
All set, Peter?
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah. Erica?
I want to touch on the scenario that Ralph Toulis presented to us. So if in his suggestion, we were to keep as a municipal building of some sort, the original structure, and then completely separate the school structure, would there be any funding for potential demolition between the two buildings? Where would that cost be borne? Would it be strictly on the town?
If I'm demolishing a portion of the building and a portion of that building that I'm demolishing, I'm replacing the building with school, then it's reimbursable. If I'm demolishing it merely to demolish it and I'm building the school someplace else, the answer is no.
Thank you.
We do not do municipal investment.
So just to clarify that, so if the original structure of Hall were to stay and the wings, if you will, were to get demolished and new wings were put on, then that all of that would be reimbursable?
The portion that's demolished and replaced
Right.
would be reimbursable.
With new wings, like with new additions, if you will, that would accommodate.
Well,
okay.
If we're looking to replace it in the same fashion that it's in now with no windows, and that's not going to happen. But yes,
No.
yes,
No.
if you demolish and replace with new, then it's reimbursable.
Would the assumption be that the replacement would still then be connected to the original building? So when you say replace, up to the new codes, but completely replaced in part of that structure. Right? I mean, if we're completely, if in Mr.
Right.
Tulis's description, we're separating the two buildings, it would be on the town to demolish the portions we're not keeping and then reimbursable to portions that are added to a school structure, correct?
Perfectly said.
Okay, thank you.
But what if they were connected? What if the additions that,
You're gonna have, well, whatever. The portion of the wall that belongs to the school would be reimbursable. The portion that is not belonging to the school would not be reimbursable. You'd have to be careful about your HVAC systems and so on and so forth, because we're not paying for that. We're not paying for sprinkler systems to go into the new building. We're not doing any of that.
even if it's used for a school?
No. I thought we were talking about part of it being used for municipal.
No, no, no.
The municipal side wouldn't, but if they're tied together, I see what you're saying. If they're tied together, only a portion of your construction is going to be covered. Is that what you're saying? You just be
That's
careful
correct.
about connecting systems.
Yes,
And I would imagine in a
Correct.
scenario like this, there would be a concern about school safety in a connection to a municipal building.
absolutely. Absolutely, because I would have to sign off on the security portions of it, and I'm very careful about that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Erica. Thank you, Costa. Like to open it up to whoever I can see on the screen. It's not a lot of people, but let's start with, and I'm picking those that are not on the committee. So first one I see here is Tanya Pilati. Would you like to add anything or have any questions for Costa?
I guess my only question would be if they're talking about building off of, turning hall into whatever, a municipal building and adding on from there, though, how does that 20-acre thing come into that if you're building a new school, or is that not in play if you're adding on to an existing building?
Good question.
Always in play.
But
It's
so
always-
there's not 20 acres, I'm assuming, right, that Hall School owns to begin with, right? So that's not even, doesn't that kind of cancel that out?
If the question's for me, the answer is the required amount of acreage is required,
Right.
and under all circumstances, so that the children have the playscape space that they need, the whatever other space that they need that's associated with it.
Right. So that was it, I guess. That was what I was saying is, I guess if they were to build a new school and keep that building, we already don't have that space there. So that's already not a feasible thing to do. It sounds like.
Right, just the acreage alone will.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. That was all.
thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
Next I can see is Herb. Do you have any questions?
Herb, you're muted. Catherine, they can just raise their hand too if they have a question on screen.
Okay,
And
can
I-
you, the Hall School is close to 100 years old at the present time. The building is well constructed and certainly is a fine building in many ways. But is it really an appropriate building for the way things are today in the world? A new school, you can put in new gymnasiums, you can put in libraries that are up to date. The science area, labs can be updated without any difficulty. So is it better to go with a new school than an older school? It's 100 years old that you're renovating, but it's really not going to be a modern in the true sense of the word. Whereas if you build a brand new school, you can put things in there that normally you would not have in an older 100-year-old piece of property.
It's well said, and I greatly appreciate your comments, because there are in fact 100-year-old buildings that lend themselves to the labs that you're speaking of and the renovation that would probably give another 50-year life to a building. That is what we look at when we're looking to keep the life going of a building. There are some that are 100 years old and make it to 100 years, but they're at their end of their life. It is my humble opinion that the building that we're talking about now is at that point as it relates to a school, with all the new conditions of schools and labs and the expectations. I think if I remember correctly, the library used to be the town's library, and we built around it to make it the school's library. So you're absolutely right. Things have changed, and certain buildings are adaptable to the change, and some are not. Very quickly at my first visit, this building is not one of those that I think is easily adaptable to the newer science labs and to the libraries and to the media centers and to the code requirements based on the age groups. But again, it's still food for thought and things that we need to look at.
Another factor too is not only the building itself, but also you mentioned 20 acres, which means that you have outside facilities. You have softball fields, baseball fields, tracks that could be put in. At Hall School, for example, the space is rather restricted, and our center school is the same way. And most of the schools today have provision for athletic, sports, and outdoor activities.
That's true. And again, the playscapes for the younger children. Fenced in, you need this particular areas, security pieces to go with it. Bathrooms and classrooms for pre-K, things like that. So there are many things that have to come into play.
Thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
The other two folks I can see are Matt Clark and John Blessington. So if either one of you have questions or comments you'd like to, Matt?
Yeah, I am was wondering about 400. I mean, why is 400 the sort of minimum effective size? I've never heard of that before. Yeah. Is there someplace you can point me to help us understand why a minimum school size for effective education is 400? And I have a couple of follow-up questions as well.
Sure. The Superintendent's Association, SEA, and all the others that have done their studies and their reports have put that out. So there's one that was recently done for the city of Hartford as well. But there are treatises out there on that very subject. And that is the number that's out there. So if you look at some of those websites for your superintendents programs that they have, and I'm sure the superintendents come up with it because they have access to it all along. It's part of their studies as well as when they're going through their superintendent school. I know that it's one of the courses they take as far as what their minimum standards are at this point that they're talking about for an effective educational program. And that critical mass is at 400. But I can dig it out, send it along, but I'm sure your superintendent can find it as well.
Maybe I can follow up with Phil, and Phil, maybe you can provide that to the committee. You know, I didn't go, I went to schools that were much lower than 400 people. But yeah, I'm also interested in, you know, mixing 5-year-olds, kindergartners with teenagers. You know, the way we get to a 400 student census is with our entire student population in Willington. So that ranges, our age group, as you've mentioned several times, is 5 to what, 13 or something like that. Is that advisable? I mean, every town I've ever known of and everywhere I've ever been has always had separate schools. And this is the first time I've heard of mixing them together. Can you comment on that at all?
Sure. There are districts, in fact, who have pre-K through 8s. There are districts who have pre-K through 2s and 1s, and it's whatever style sometimes that a district can come up with based on the buildings, capacities, student body, the number of students they have in each school, what they can maintain, what they can afford to maintain in their buildings and for upkeep, what the taxpayers are willing to spend on or not willing to spend on. So there are multiple age groups that go into the various schools, but there are schools who have gone back to the traditional pre-K through 8. And have done that as well. So it really is based on a district consensus of what would work for them and the cost associated with that.
Yeah, I just, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, anyway, maybe we can talk about that with the committee. The roofs for those schools, our existing schools, it's my understanding that they were approved in a town meeting. And the money was never spent and the project was never done. And I just was curious, if maybe Mr. Costa and maybe others on the committee, what happens when the legislative body of the town approves something and it never happens? I mean, I thought that was, once it was approved, that was it. It had to get done. I was just curious about what do we do now? How do we move forward?
Is the question about the roofs?
Yes, the question is about the roofs. The roofs were approved by the legislative function of our town, which is our town meeting, and it never happened. So how do we move forward now? Do we have another town meeting to negate the last one? Do we just ignore it and just move forward like it never happened? I don't quite understand how we move forward now.
I'm not familiar with your charter, so I probably wouldn't be the best person to answer the question for you. But it sounds like a funding issue more than it sounds like a purpose. So I think if the idea is, do you have a project? The legislative body said, yes, we want to put a roof on the building. And I think the other part of that question probably was, yes, let's put the roof on the building because it's a school and apply for a grant from the school construction for the state of Connecticut. However, my fiduciary responsibility says that if I'm putting a roof on a school that's not going to be used as a school in the near future, because they have plans of either consolidating or building a new school, it would be remiss of me as a fiduciary of state funds to put the roof on a building that will not be a school any longer, because then under the statute requires me to send you a bill to pay me the difference of the 20-year life of the loan. So again, I don't know your charter, so I'm not sure what the next process is for you. But again, we're not there either. So I guess I'm not sure where your committee is going to land on renovation, new, etc. I mean, I have an idea, I think, where your committee's going, and it's probably the right way. But as of this point, as the fiduciary for state taxpayer dollars, I'm not going to invest in a roof that may not be a school when I'm looking to build a school in that very same town.
Understood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matt. John, did you have any questions before I jump into the people on the phone? You're on mute, John.
Actually, I think Matt pretty much covered the issue that I had there. Again, we're going to have to look very closely into this because the town did pass this, did twice had town meetings. The first time we authorized the expenditure of about $1 million to do this, and time went by and it never got done. And by the time, but a year later, the cost of it had gone up to $1.6 million, which we also have authorized. And as far as I'm concerned, we're going to need to do this, keeping in mind that these buildings are ours, whether they're going to be used for schools or not. And we can't let them fall apart, which of course a bad roof is the first thing that'll have that happen. So this is more than an issue of just, okay, we won't do it. I think we need to do it. Thank you.
Catherine, you had two folks who raised their hand earlier. I don't know if you want to start with them.
You might have lost her, Erica, if you want to.
Okay. Deanna Vokoun had raised her hand before. She had a question.
Yeah, I was just about to jump into the folks. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
We
we thought
can,
we
yeah.
lost you for a
We
second,
lost
so.
you. A couple of people had raised their hand earlier and you may not have been able to see that. So I don't know if Deanna still wanted to speak.
Yeah, and anybody that's not on camera right now, you have the ability to unmute yourself and just say your name and be recognized by Catherine, I think.
Yep.
And you'll be able to ask your question. So if you're not on camera, that's probably the way you should handle it right now.
Sarah Baker has her hand raised and so does Donna Cook.
Yeah, I can't see the hand raising, so.
Right.
I can let you know.
We can help you with that. We can. see if
Oh,
you are-
okay.
Sarah Baker has her hand up.
Go ahead, Sarah.
You should be able to unmute yourself.
You're on mute. No, you can't.
Can you now?
Yes, I
Thanks.
can. Thank you. All right. So first, I'm excited about the idea of a K-8. I think if you go to some of the other surrounding schools, if you go to Ashford, you go to Bolton. Bolton, I think, is a great model. You know, they've got space for all their kids. It's another tiny town. The facilities are fantastic. They have the younger kids separated from the older kids. You know, there's separate entrance and separate wings. So I think, there's a lot of existing templates to go off of. But one question for Costa, and sorry if you covered this already, if during the renovation or even like a demolish, if there are expenses related to any, I don't know, environmental hazards that are uncovered, how are those handled? If there's, asbestos, if there's vermiculite, if there's, anything else that's toxic and needs remediation?
If it's associated with the school project, we pay for it and it's part of the project. We'll reimburse the town for it. If it's part of the demolition and that's where the school is being replaced with, then that too is part of the reimbursement rate. It's part of the construction project. If you're talking about swing space, that's another story. So if you're talking about temporary space, we do not pay for temporary space.
Thank you. Anything else, Sarah? Okay, Phil, can you tell me who else?
Donna Cook had her hand raised. I think she's unmuted now.
Hi, Donna Cook. I have a couple of questions. One is, one of the reasons I think we were able to respond so well to the COVID situation is because we have extra space so we could spread kids out. Are there going to be new guidelines coming out about how space is calculated so that school districts can appropriately respond to these unforeseen circumstances?
No.
Okay.
What school districts need to do is when schools are renovated and or rebuilt or are new, the most important thing districts need to do is to maintain their systems, their heating and air conditioning systems. And so they are appropriately ventilated, and that we build and renovate schools with appropriate air circulation and to ensure the safety of children and the adults in school buildings. But space standards are not going to change as a result of this particular pandemic.
And then I know you said that 400 students in a building makes it most educationally effective. Are there also numbers regarding the class size?
There are. We use standards for that. And again, please don't think it's me that said that. I'm by no means a superintendent of schools. I merely take the information that they provide me based on their scholastic abilities, and they say this is the critical mass. So those are the guidelines that I use from the State Department of Education and superintendents, et cetera. As far as square foot per student, it is based on the age group that we're talking about. And yes, those are also in the guidelines that architects and school districts use. We have 4 years ago, put online a tool for boards of ed and for building committees to utilize to create those space standards so they can see how much space they have available to them to give them a good idea of how big a school they can build. So that tool is online, it's on our website, and it's usable.
Thank you. And the other question is, currently Hall School is a fallout shelter, emergency shelter for our community.
I saw that. Yeah.
How does that get factored into a new school building, assuming that Hall and Center are no longer used?
I can't say to you that the old fallout criterion that we used back in the day when I was a kid. I'm turning 65 in a few days, so I remember those fallout centers areas, and I certainly remember being taught to, you know, bring my head down to my knees in case there's an atomic bomb. So for purposes today, the codes are the codes that we follow, and I can't add any more as far as a fallout shelter is concerned.
Well, I was thinking is not so much fallout aspect, but an emergency shelter when we've had terrible storms go through, loss of electric for prolonged periods of time.
Listen, if the school has, you know, if there's if the school is designated for a particular purpose and use in communities, and there are portions of it that we can assist in reimbursing for whatever purpose that may be, we certainly will do the best we can to assist you in that. We recognize, at least I recognize, behind highways and bridges, the second most utilized building in any community is a school. So whatever we can do to assist you in that, we will.
And then lastly, if the school system decided that instead of going through for a pre-K through 8th, is it feasible to do, say, a 5th through 8th to make the changes at Hall so it would be educationally appropriate? Or would that not be appropriate because we would not have 400 students?
That's the problem. The problem is the size of the number of students. And, you know, we have portions of the state in which there aren't enough students to put in a particular school building. And it becomes a per student cost that is excessive. And so we have to take that in consideration. Enrollment is a key factor in making a determination if we're going to build schools, or if consolidation is important, or if regionalization is important. And can that occur?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna. I'm just going to call on Erica real quick. She had her hand up while you were talking about the emergency. No, all set?
I think Donna cleared it up. It's an emergency shelter for the town as opposed to a fallout shelter. Knock on wood, we don't need a fallout shelter.
It wouldn't do any good based on what I know.
No.
Okay, who else had their hand up? I see Corey and Jean Brennan.
Yep.
Hi, Corey.
Hi, how are you? Quick question. So how many acres is Hall School?
14.9.
So this would be to you, Costa. So like they would not put any additions onto it. That'd be a flat no because it's not that 20 acres, correct?
I think you'd run into problems. And, you know, again, I haven't listed, I don't have a site plan. I haven't done design. I haven't done building on it, no fields, you know. It's kind of like saying, can you paint my house? And I've never seen it, and how many gallons would it take? You know.
I was just trying to clarify, like, so like that would be technically nixed, as Tanya was trying to say earlier, like, so if it doesn't meet your 20 acre requirement, then it's not even feasible.
Well, it's hard to envision how you would get all of the necessary requirements on something less than 20 acres.
Perfect. Thank you.
You currently do not have a baseball field at Hall School because you lack the land you have.
There you go.
Anybody else have their hand up? Hold on, Peter. I'm just going to try to cover everybody else that's on the phone first.
Anyone else that's not on camera, you can, I did change the setting. You can unmute yourself if you have a question.
Okay, so let's jump to Peter, and then we'll try to wrap up the question and answer session, unless there's a few last minute, but I'm sure Mr. Costa is very busy, and we appreciate him being on. So let's take your questions, Peter. Oh, you're on mute, bud.
Thank you. That last question prompted a question in my head. I noticed that in the, I believe it is the Ellington School, they're delaying their project a year because they fell in school population below that threshold of 400 you were talking about. And that impacted their reimbursement apparently. Is that a real concern for our committee? Like if we find out that we're at 380 or something post-COVID, what does that mean?
Okay, as I said, it's a 400 number plus or minus. If you're telling me you're at 380 or 390, of course not, you know, and even if it's slightly lower than that, but the minute we start talking 200 and 240 and 250,
Okay.
it gets problematic.
Oh, that's a big difference. Thank you very much. And thank you for your time this evening.
Sure.
So unless there's any last minute questions, speak up now, forever hold your peace. And I think we'll thank Costa one more time for joining us this evening and being very thorough with your questions and answers. Everybody, there were excellent questions. So we appreciate you being here. If you have anything for us before you depart, have a great night.
Thank you very much.
You're
Anything you need, you know how to find me. Just let me know, let us know, whatever our office can do to assist you as you go through your process. We're available.
Thank you, Costa.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, thank you all for your questions. We'll continue with the meeting. And so I believe we're just about to review the documents that the subcommittee, communications committee has prepared for us. So I think,
Yep.
Bill, you're going to be putting those on the screen.
Sure. I mean, these were the documents that were shared out. This is the communications plan. Let me just put this on screen. Give me 1 second.
And this communications plan this committee has created the subcommittee to come up with a communications plan to effectively communicate the updates of this committee to the town and in various ways.
Correct. And so Ann, Gary, and I worked through this. We took a couple meetings to go through and identify this. It just basically highlights how the committee will get information out to the public, the ways we're going to do that, whether it's local press. And we'll put this on, once it's approved, we'll put this on the web page. But it's just the Willington Wire, the school building committee page, which is off of the school's web page. We'll have the frequently asked questions on the school building committee web page. We have a specific email that we'll be using, and then I took a shot at creating a Facebook page that we are not going to monitor. I'm going to clearly say that we are not going to monitor. Anything we put on there will be for information only, and we are not allowing comments because we are not monitoring that. We think, Eric and I have messed with this a little bit. We think we're getting to a point now where when we post something onto that page, it will allow us to just get information out. If someone wants to be like the page, they can see it. But it wouldn't allow for comments on that page. So that's coming. And then the community engagement opportunities, obviously are we have the public to speak. This is the SBC email. If you want to email feedback, thoughts, concerns, this email comes to members of this committee. And I say members, it really comes to Eric and I, because I think we're the only paid folks on this committee. And then we will share all the information through to Catherine as the chair. And any of these communications would be obviously be able to be seen by the committee. We'll have at some point some open forums, but I think we need to get to a point where we're able to do that. And then surveys. So that's kind of a general overview of how the committee will be communicating out, and all formal communications will come through the chair. So questions from the committee about this?
Anne, why don't you go ahead?
You're muted, Ann, too. Ann, you're muted.
I just a point of clarification with our SBC email. If we get a question that we think is relevant to many people, we will answer it in our frequently asked questions section. So that's something for everyone to kind of keep an eye on, because that's where the most important questions will be answered.
Thank you, Anne. You guys did a great job putting this together. And I think it tackled the questions that we had as a committee. How are we going to communicate to the town? And so I just commend you for taking the time and putting this together. So if there are no other comments or questions or discussions about this, I'd like to make a motion to move to approve the school building committee communications plan. Is there a motion on the table for that?
Need a second.
So moved.
Erica? Second? Anne?
I'll second the motion.
And we just had oh, Peter, you have a question under discussion?
I do. I'm sorry. I lost myself in the, the text. So if we get an email, will we all see it? If some of if a townsperson communicates with us?
So the email it goes to Erica's inbox and my inbox, and then we'll share all those communications with Catherine. But I mean, I think the point is all of that stuff is FOIable, but we wouldn't require that. We would just, if you want the emails, anything you want to see, we would share out. And I think the idea is that we can identify each meeting. Hey, we received 10 emails. Here they are, fire through. It could be part of our communications. So you have access to any of them. And then to Ann's point, it doesn't mean that we're going to respond back via email. What it means is if we get a question in there, we will add it into the frequently asked questions document, which is the second thing we'll have approval for tonight. And we'll just date it. So it has the new question, new date, and it'll show the additional the answer on there for everybody to see.
No, I wasn't suggesting that you were going to be responding to every single email, Phil. I was just want to be sure that we as a committee saw any communication that comes to us so we get a sense of what's happening with the townspeople. And sounds like that's the case. I'm happy to see you have the open forums too, when we get closer to something real. I think that would be helpful. But my one big concern that I didn't see in anything outlined is I think the bulk of our voting public is over the age of 55, those who regularly vote. And I'm guessing they're the least internet savvy. Is there a way we can get traditional paper communication out to townspeople as well on what we're doing?
So can I
don't have access to the backpack thing in the school.
No, Peter, but I think for now, we'll continue to use our typical means of communication. When we get to larger forums and events, we'd have to look at whether or not we put something in a mailbox. That comes certainly with a cost that currently this committee doesn't have access to. But we'd have to look as a town. The town is looking at communications software to be utilized that will take some input from folks that could allow a phone call, an email, a text for important forums, these public forums where we really want to make sure we hit as many people as possible. That will be something we'll attempt to utilize. But you know, a paper communication as in mailing, if you're thinking about mailing, that comes at a cost. So we really have to think about what it is that we are mailing out and how often and who's going to bore the cost of that. But we will continue to push out things in the ways we are currently. And that new communication software, one of the things that we really want to take a look at is how we can inform about town meetings, specifically any kind of votes, and that software we'd want to utilize for that. And again, that could be a phone call with an auto message, a text with an automated message, those things.
That's a serious concern for me because it sounds like we're excluding a lot of people.
Do you have any suggestion, Peter, for what you would do if you were in charge of that piece of it? Were you thinking of a mailer?
I think a committee with our responsibility should have a budget for printing and mailing information to our townspeople. I don't think that's unreasonable, particularly when we're considering a $40 million school. Surely we can afford a few mailings.
Anne has her hand up. Catherine.
Anne, go ahead.
Peter, we're also doing update in every Willington wire. I don't know if that would help, or is that also electronic? But
It's electronic.
Electronic.
This is not necessarily me. I'm making the best effort I can to enter the 21st century, but I've talked to a lot of people in town who feel excluded from our process. Many of them graduates of Hall School, interestingly.
I think one of the challenges, Peter, is if you send a mailer, and I agree with you, we have to get as much information we can to everybody in town. I think it's a responsibility. That's why we created this document. What you can put in a mailer and a postcard, that we'll say the postcard is the cheapest option, is really minimal information. I mean, you won't be able to put a ton of information on there. If you're going to put out a Willington wire size document, or maybe you're putting out a couple page document, I think that's something that we'll have to figure out if that's, there's funding behind that. And I agree with you. There are going to be some critical points in the work of this committee where we need to get information out. And what is the best way to do that? And are we really blanketing the entire community or only a portion of the community? So I think you have some validity to it. I think it just costs money.
And I don't disagree, Peter, that we, depending on where we go with this, we're going to have to spend some dollars. So we'll need to go before the Board of Finance when we determine as a committee what it is we're asking for funding wise, and what that looks like. So that's, a finance committee is probably warranted at some point from this board. But for sure, if we're, having a large meeting, absolutely, if and when we get to a referendum point, a mailer, I think, is necessary, regardless.
Can we add written communication to our information sharing strategies before we vote on it?
We can't do written communication right now, though, because we don't have a budget to be able to mail them out.
Right, but to your point, Peter.
We can always request from the Board of Finance.
Right, but to your point,
They're
Peter,
nice,
we can always update this document as well. Just because we vote on it today does not mean we can't make modifications to it in the future. If we do have modifications to it based on your suggestion or somebody else's suggestion, we can propose and put on the table for a vote a revision to it. So I think the goal of getting this out the door was to make sure that we covered all the bases that we knew we could cover in getting and sharing this information to the public and to the community. One thing I was just looking for is, I know that we have agendas that we post and we have meeting minutes that we post for the for our meetings. Is that, help me, is that under the school building committee webpage? Is that where that is?
No, all meeting minutes are and agendas are posted on the town's website.
So which category would it fall in under here?
School building committee website on the front page, the first page.
No, that's a school website
Oh, well, the school building committee website?
right here, Catherine. So on this public to speak section, it's a live link for agendas, for minutes.
Okay.
And this is the town's YouTube page for all the videos.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I guess I wasn't thinking it would be under that category. I don't know if that makes a huge difference, but
Well, I think the reason why we did this in two prongs. Information sharing strategies is from us. It's from the committee. And then feedback and community engagement opportunities is the community saying, here's what we think, here's where we have questions. And that's why it was put in this section here. And
Okay.
so they can access, our meetings and present to speak, public to speak. And that's why it was put in this section.
okay,
I don't know
that's
if you
fair.
see Brianna, she has her hand raised.
I'm sorry.
Brianna had her hand raised. I don't know if you can see her.
Hi, Brianna. No, I didn't. I missed it. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I agree with Peter, and that's actually part of the reason why I try to be very precise with our minutes, because I know that we do have some townsfolk who reading the minutes is probably the best way they will get this information, and maybe it's their preferred method actually. So I heard you say that sending mailers to everyone is difficult because we don't have a lot of space, and also it can be costly. But would it be possible to just print 1 or 2 copies of the Willington Wire or 1 or 2 copies of our FAQ or minutes and leave them available for folks to come take a gander at the town hall or the senior center or the library, just a few key places around the town, so that if folks wanted to take time and catch themselves up and they're not able to get on the internet or can't access those other things, they could hold paper copy for a few minutes and take a look through it so they are more well informed.
So I can tell you that Willington Wire copies are definitely placed in those areas in the senior center, in the library, and here in the town office building. We do print a couple of paper copies. As a procedure, I don't, it's something to take a look at and consider, who's going to be responsible for printing copies of the minutes every time we have a meeting and disperse those at the various locations. We don't do that for other boards and committees, and we want, our residents to be informed about everything. I would ask that maybe the communications subcommittee consider this discussion for a future update of this document. So then we could have something more specific to vote on. But, as it stands now, but we may want to consider additional sources.
I agree, Erica. It sounds like a good approach. I'm not sure if anybody else has any comments, if we are ready to vote, at least on this version, so we can get it.
Anne has her hand up and I'd like to comment.
Okay, hi, Anne.
Hi, I'd just like to ask Peter one more question. Peter, do you think that if we were to put information in the Chronicle or the Current, or would that reach this population you're speaking of?
Doubtful, but I think both of those mediums have really declined in recent years. That's my personal opinion.
Okay.
Wrong. I could be wrong. I think
Oh.
mailers would be the most successful.
Okay, thank you.
They're probably about equal cost at this point too, Anne. We might be better off getting a local reporter to run a story, and then if people have access to it, but putting all the information out.
Okay, Catherine,
Yes.
Ralph here.
Hi, Ralph.
Peter's earlier comment about incoming emails to the committee, with any comments with respect to the business of the committee. I would like to see them distributed for item 5 on our agenda each meeting, so that the committee members can see what kind of communications are coming in.
Okay.
I don't want them to be just glossed over when we hit item 5. Well, we got 10 emails. Okay. I'd like to know what the content of those 10 emails were.
Oh, I thought we were going to get them.
Bill and I will send them on to Catherine, and then
I just want to make sure the committee members get them. That's all.
Do you want to
we
set
haven't
them
gotten
up?
one yet.
Do you want to set them up in a Google Drive or something in one of our folders?
I think that's awkward. I think it's easier just what does it take to put them into a singular PDF file and distribute it with the agenda?
Who's doing that?
That's right. Whose responsibility is that?
Sounds like
Communications, the communications committee.
Sounds like Ralph is volunteering for that one.
I'm not volunteering, but I think it's appropriate for the communications committee.
We can agree to disagree. I can tell you communications via email come to staff and committees all the time. Important ones are certainly shared with you, but if we put out a mailer and you get 50 emails, I don't know what we'll get. They could be 50 emails asking how to access the minutes, how to access the Facebook page.
Right.
Asking someone to gather those and distribute those communications is unusual, I will say.
Well, as the chair of the committee, when an email comes in from Phil or Erica regarding questions about what the work is that we're doing, obviously, I can do my best to cut and paste that into a single document and share it with you at the meeting, and then go from there.
It's always helpful to get communications prior to the night of the meeting.
Yeah.
I don't want to waste time in a meeting reading documents that I could have read the day or two before the meeting. That's all.
I will add, Ralph, that they are then communications of the committee, and the committee does its work in public at the table at the committee. So that would not be, that would be the appropriate time for the committee to receive those documents.
All right. It doesn't sound very transparent to me, but okay.
No one's being not transparent. I'm just saying we do work in public, so it would not be unusual to receive those documents at the time of the meeting or just before the meeting. The work we do transparent is at the table in front of the public, not behind the scenes before.
I get that.
Okay, so all right, Peter, last call.
Last call. Could we modify this community engagement opportunities to include yourself, Catherine, placing our request on the agenda of the Board of Finance for a budget for communications so that we could pursue expanded opportunities in written and other forms, just so we can get the community involved better, because the feedback I'm getting is no one has any idea what we're doing. And I think there is interest. They just don't know. So can you just place yourself, can we just place ourselves on the agenda of their next meeting and request they provide us with a budget for communications?
As new business? Is that what we could put it on new business for tonight, right?
No, Peter's asking if I'm hearing him right. Peter's asking if this committee can request the Board of Finance at their next meeting for funds to allow communications mailers to go out to get some sort of budget for that purpose. Am I hearing you right, Peter?
You are, Phil. That's accurate. Thank you.
I would ask before we do that we have a conversation as a committee of what it is we think we need before we go asking for what. We don't know what we're asking for. I think in order to get on their agenda, it would be for their July 15th meeting, that we have a discussion as a board prior to that, a committee prior to that, to ask what it is we would be asking of the Board of Finance. To go in there and say we want some money, they're going to ask us what our plan is, and we don't have that at this point. So I think an agenda item at our next committee meeting would be appropriate.
Yeah, so two things here. I think to Peter's point is for the next subcommittee, communications, that's something that they can define the scope of what it is that we need funds for. So I would request that of the subcommittee, communication subcommittee to work on that as the next item. In addition, once they come back to the table with their recommendation for, here's our scope and we're gonna go to the funding Board of Finance to ask for money. My question about that, is that the job of the subcommittee to go to the Board of Finance, or is that the job of the school building committee to go to the Board of Finance to ask for funding?
I would say it would be the committee.
Not
The
the
committee
sub.
would, the committee would be asking for funds.
Okay, so I think to address Peter's comment, we'll ask the subcommittee to come up with a scope, like a scope of work of what we want to put in that mailer, what the money's going to be used for essentially. And then in our next agenda, we can put it as new business for our next agenda meeting. Is that fair? Peter, does that satisfy your request?
I'm a bit disappointed, frankly, but I'm sensing that there'll be no changes to what we're voting on now.
Well, that's not true. So what gets voted on tonight is a document that we have at least a guideline of how we're going to be communicating to the public and how we're going to receive communications. This is we're going to approve this tonight, hopefully. And if there's revisions to it, right? If we have to make a revision to it, we'll discuss it in one of our meetings that you would say, I'd like to make an amendment to the school building committee communications plan, and I would like to include the following. And then that gets drafted and then we re-vote on the amendment. This is not a static document once it's approved. It does have the ability to be revised. I guess I'm not really sure where and what we would say in this plan before we approve it. If you can help me understand that.
I don't mean to belabor it. I was just hoping that we could at least have the task itself defined of presenting to the Board of Finance a request for a budget for written communication.
Which we can, but I'm not sure that this is the platform for that. Right? Like to ask for funding should not be in the communications plan unless I'm missing something. That should be part of the subcommittee, the school building committee's request. So we will satisfy your request. It just, I don't think it belongs in this plan here. Does anybody else have any feedback? Anne?
I think as a committee, we could talk about it. We could maybe get a figure for how much it costs to do a mailing to the town. And then maybe at some really pivotal time, you know, if there is a referendum, if there is something really important, then we would have a plan of how we could inform the community of that. So I don't think it hurts to have a plan in place. And then, you know, perhaps ask for the money if that's what we all agree we need to do. But
I think what Peter's looking for is to have something identified in the communications plan that considers a mailer. So maybe we can put a statement in there that says at pivotal points of communication, the subcommittee communications will consider mailings. But I think the budget request and the money request has to fall within the actual building committee and not the subcommittee.
I would agree to that too. Yeah. And if we had greater needs, I don't know what our other needs are at this point, but we could request it at one time. Greater financial needs. Say we're ready to talk about our project manager or something, you know, something like that, that also required money. But that's way ahead, I'm guessing.
So Peter, do you want to make a motion to modify this document in any way before we move to take a vote?
No, I'll pass on that. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, so is there a motion on the table to approve the school building committee communications plan?
There we have it.
The
There we
motion
have
and
it.
a
Andy.
second. Motion and second. It was seconded by Ann.
Okay, so Erica, right, okay, Erica moved it and then Aaron seconded it, and we just had a lengthy discussion. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays?
Hey,
Any abstentions? Okay, the communications plan is still approved. Can we move on to questions, frequently asked questions document, which was also prepared by our subcommittee communications. I'm assuming everybody had a chance to review this document. And if there's anything we should add or subtract, we can open it up to discussion at this time. Any chance you can zoom in on this, Phil? Please. Oh, he's smiling. I don't know. There we go. Thank you.
I'm smiling because we sent this ahead of time and I'm hoping people looked at it.
That's why I said, I assume. So is there any discussion? Again, I will just say that there was a lot of effort put into this. I think it was nicely formatted and it has a lot of content. So I thank you for your efforts to the subcommittee for the communications.
And those are the questions so far. Peter,
Can I
just
go-
like your comment, sorry, Ralph, just like your comment about adding that, if there are funds and there's an identification for mailers and it goes just like we would revise the last one, that would be voted on. This is the same thing. So if you would approve this document as it stands tonight, and then if there's any changes, say there's new questions that come forward, we would we would shift all this down. We would add a new date in and we would add those questions, and then the full committee, not the subcommittee, the full committee would approve the new question and answers that are in there.
And the subcommittee would actually bring it to the committees, would bring it to the table for us to review and approve, right, Phil?
Correct.
The only thing I would add on here, if I can't really, let me go to the document. Is there a date of when, like as of, questions as of a certain date? Or last,
Great.
Be as of the date we approve it. So as of today, so then it would say
How's that?
approved.
Okay, can I get my comment in?
who's that? Ralph?
Ralph,
Yeah, hi, Ralph.
Is there a motion?
hi.
I didn't know you had a comment. Go ahead.
Well, I interrupted Phil or Phil interrupted me. I'm not sure exactly who did what, but the question, could students continue to be educated in our schools during a renovation project? I understand why the initial reaction to that is no, they cannot. However, it goes on to talk about requiring the use of portable classrooms. And with the scheme that I have in the back of my head for Hall School, that might not be the case. And I think to put out there that we are going to have portable classrooms is not quite correct at this point in time. Certainly, there are some areas of a renovation that would require the students to be moved. I just don't like putting that out there, as particularly with this statement, the cost of portable classrooms is not reimbursable as part of the Office of School Construction Grant. That scares taxpayers right off the bat. I think we need to clarify that a little bit. if we can add on and not affect what's going on in the building, there's no reason for portable classroom.
I think, I hear what you're saying about the rest of it, but the statement, the cost of portable classrooms is not reimbursable, is an absolute transparent fact. And
I
even
don't
though-
disagree.
even if it scares people, it's important that we say it. So
Okay.
let's not hide it. Let's not sugarcoat it. It's the reality. No,
But I don't think a renovation is going to mandate the use of portable classrooms. Depends how it's phased.
Right, and I think the key word to this too, and we can open it up to the subcommittee meeting who actually put this together. We'll find out where this information came from, but it says, could students continue to be educated in the schools during a renovation project? So this question might be focused on the education portion of it, which is, okay, you're right, Ralph, you could put a temporary wall and separate the education building from the renovation building, but is that realistic? Having hammering and demoing and all of that right next door, that's going to vibrate through the entire school. So I think this was focused on educating those schools during a renovation project. But let's open it up to the subcommittee members for the communications as to how this question was generated.
Okay, Catherine, I heard what you said, and I don't completely disagree with you. But as far as the noise aspect, I lived through 2 school additions in Willington. I never considered the noise to be that much of a distraction, but that's just me. But if you build a new wing that is separated from the school, you don't need portable classrooms for swing space.
Necessarily, you don't necessarily need. I mean, it's all. You're right, possibly.
It
but
all depends on how it's phased.
Correct. So I know Erica's got her hand up, but I wanted to hear from the folks that are on the subcommittee meeting for how did this question come up and how was it answered?
Many of these questions go back to the Fryer report or some of the older questions. And that was one of the issues that they addressed when we talked about all of our seven different options or whatever number of options we had. So it's a generalized statement. And like you're pointing out, Ralph, it doesn't mean that you must, but it is a possibility that we could need them. And if we did need them, it's important to know that they are not reimbursable.
Okay, can we change one word then? Second sentence, a renovation could require the use of portable classrooms.
I agree to that. Yep.
I would offer in the first sentence, students may be able to, right? So it's dependent on the project.
Correct.
So it would depend on the scope of the work, yes or no. And then the only part that I think stays is if portable classrooms were necessary, they wouldn't be reimbursable.
That's fine. I don't have a problem with the last sentence.
Right. But I think the rest of it all depends on the project. So I think the answer, even though Fryer may have said that in their statement, I understand now where you would have gotten it from, but the answer is they may or may not be able to. It depends on the project.
But
Determined
I'm going
project.
to disagree with you. The Fryer report is very clear. If you are going to renovate, it is not talking about addition. This question is not talking about a new wing. That is very clear. A renovation of a building, of one of our current buildings, where are you putting students during a renovation of a building? Typically, you would put everybody in one side and renovate one side, and then you'd flip-flop them. We've been told that cannot happen at Center School because there's no space. Hall School, you'd have to figure out, they have mentioned renovate that building to new. This has a very specific term. Renovate to new, they have said that building needs to be gutted. I'm not sure how you would renovate that building and keep students in it. Ralph's example with a new wing is also in the Fryer report. And what they said was, if you built a new section, you would do that first. Then you would move students into that new section and you would renovate the rest. That is the example where you would not require or potentially require swing space. But based upon what we know from the Fryer study and from Costa's walkthrough, you would require, if you were doing a renovation, you would require swing space.
Can we change it to renovate to new project as opposed to then we're clear on what the renovation is? Because I think to some folks, and I think that's what I'm hearing, renovation could be a complete reno to new or an addition, and you're not using them interchangeably, correct? So your original answer to renovate to new project was they would require, would not be able to use the existing building, Phil, is what I'm hearing.
Correct. I don't know that we've had anyone tell us to date that here's how you can renovate. And we're really talking about Hall School, let's face it. There's Center School, I'm not sure how you would renovate that building with students in it right now. It's packed to the seams. As far as Hall goes, I haven't heard anyone say to Hall School, when I say anyone, I'm talking about professionals, and I'm talking about Acosta, I'm talking about a Fryer study. I haven't heard any of those folks say this building could be renovated with students in it. And that's the reason for this statement.
So do you want to keep would, Phil? Students would not be able?
Honestly, it doesn't matter to me. I just wanted to clarify why the question was there. And I think the reason, and this is where when we say renovate to new, there's very specific criteria from the Office of School Construction. Which means everything in that project comes up to code. If we're saying new, that has a very specific, expectation. So I mean, I'm not sure and to Ralph's point, there may need to be a question to say, if you built a new addition, a new wing onto Hall School and then demolish the other wing, they wouldn't call that a renovation. They would call that, I think, they would call an addition. That section would be reimbursed as new. You would pay for, I think you'd get reimbursed on the demolition. I'm not positive about that.
Yeah.
But you would then move students into that new.
He said the demolition would be reimbursable as long as we were putting a new addition that's being used as school.
And what was demolition would need to be a school. It would need to become a part of this.
So, and maybe that's where the clarification needs to be in here, because it's not there. I think Ralph's right about that, is that if you build an addition, and this is, I think there's a couple examples in the Fryer report about this. If you build an addition that is new, you might not need swing space. But if you are doing a renovate to new project, as the building stands, I'm not sure how you would do that without portables.
So I'm good with your original statements and wording, as long as we change so that we know what we're talking about. I think it makes better sense to me now. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to make a suggestion to actually strike this question, have the subcommittee meeting take another look at this question and reword it and bring it back to the committee for re-review.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good.
I have no problem with that. And I think to Ralph's point, I think that, if we're going to say this question in here, I think we should add a question or share information that's about, if you built a new wing, that might not require swing space. So give an example that might not.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that satisfy your thought, Ralph?
Pretty much.
Okay.
As long as we address the issue of how phasing can limit the amount of necessary swing space.
Yeah.
That's really my main point.
Yeah,
We don't have a coherent plan for any building as of yet.
right. And again, this is this document is a purpose, for frequently asked questions. So we would kind of be getting in the weeds of, okay, if we did this phase, it means this. If we did this, it means this. If we did this, and you could go on and on and on, because there's probably a half a dozen options to do it. So per my
It might not
original
be-
recommendation.
I'm sorry, Catherine.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, I would just strike it for the purpose of this, this document, and we can move on. Again, this is a fluid document, and that as questions come in, we're gonna be updating this. So I guess I would just ask the subcommittee to take a look at this, this question and try to consider what we're discussing tonight with Ralph's point about phasing.
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good.
Were there any other questions that any of the other committee members had before we go for a vote?
Can we,
I have a question. So
Go ahead,
these
Jason.
frequently asked questions, we're going to be adding to these or updating them. I don't want to say every meeting, but quite often.
Correct. We, as questions come in, however they come in, Justin, I don't know if it'll be every meeting, and the reason why is if the work of the subcommittees is going to have to write these questions out and answer them. It might not be every meeting, but the idea is to continually, on a regular basis, update this document. So this is where people can see the answers for the questions that are being asked, and what the reality is. Does that make sense?
Yep. My thought was, if this is the original basis document and we're not going to be updating it, or if we're going to be doing different ones, this is kind of one of the baseline questions or something that has come up. So I didn't know if it should be part of this document and voting on it with that revision, or if it was okay to have it separately.
I'm sorry, I kind of followed where you were going with it, Justin, but what is your concern is what now? If we approve this as a base document, are you saying that one question should be part of it? It should get worked out before we approve it? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, well, depending on what the response was what I was going to say to that. I'm okay with going forward the way we are.
I think I heard it, as long as we were gonna frequently update the frequently asked questions.
That is correct.
The frequently updated, frequently asked questions.
Peter, I think you had your hand up.
I did. A couple of things. I was looking at the portion there where it suggested that because the Hall School site is not a full 20 acres or not 19 acres, that it's off the table. And then the immediate next sentence is, and we will begin reviewing new sites for a new school, which I think is misleading to the public. And we want to look like we're an objective committee that's considering every option. And why wouldn't we then also look at adding land potentially to the Hall School site, for example?
Peter, can you tell me what question you're on?
Which actually, Phil, maybe we could add numbers to the questions.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
If
They
you
could
add
write about the
numbers,
Youngerman property.
I don't have my hard copy in front of me, Phil. I apologize.
That's okay.
I was just looking at it before when Catherine was, it was right below where Ralph was.
On page 2?
I think
Is it-
so, yeah. Yeah,
Well, landowners, that one.
yeah,
Oh.
landowners, yes.
Yes, right above the Youngerman question.
Right. So it, it says that the school, which I didn't hear Costa say tonight, he wasn't eliminating our current site for a K-8 at Hall. I'm not advocating we do that. I just want to have all our options on the table. And here it says, well, all bets are off. You know, why couldn't we also approach landowners about potentially augmenting our footprint at Hall School?
If there was land.
Right.
Well, there's land everywhere, right? We're creating a list.
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking to change in this. Because the first statement,
Says we don't meet the requirement.
we don't. It's,
Okay.
I mean, that's clear. We don't. There's an acreage requirement and we don't meet it. Even
The
if we
next-
add all of our students to either building, we don't meet it.
Right.
Can we
Statement
say
implies there's
instead
no alternative to a new site.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, where you're going.
Could we say the SBC will privately contact landowners if a parcel of land is identified as a potential site for a new school or addition
Or
school?
existing school.
To existing, or an addition to existing school? I think.
Why wouldn't we consider both, just for the, devil's advocate?
I think putting that out in a frequently asked question is going to concern those landowners
Yeah.
abutting both of our schools, that they think we're gonna start approaching them about buying their land, and I don't know that we're at that point, but that, to your point, that's what we would identify whether or not we could obtain land around their existing schools or others. But as far as the dollars for construction, I think we heard clearly that there was still no support for renovating our schools as they currently stand. So I'm not sure.
I didn't get that impression at all, but maybe I heard differently. My other question.
Well, hold on, before you go there, I need to know
Yeah.
what we're doing this.
Oh.
Are you gonna strike this question and send this back to the committee too?
Actually, I like Erica's point. I don't want to create a potential.
What about
issue.
the last sentence, though? That might be closer to what Erica was alluding to, which is if the landowner is interested in selling, SBC would request a site walk and complete a basic survey if the information is not already available.
Yeah, that seems concerning too. And now that you pointed out, I agree.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I don't know that we need to send the whole thing back to the subcommittee, but if I would recommend striking that last sentence.
I like your point better than mine, Catherine.
I'm not sure. What would you do then?
Nothing.
I
Just
don't
that
think-
last,
I don't think we need to advertise this fact. I agree with Catherine.
So we're gonna go out there and say, we're gonna come to you for your land, but don't come to us if you had a piece you wanted to discuss. Well, I mean, is there much difference?
No, the point of that was not, that's not the point. The point was to walk someone through the steps. So if they said, wow, and so this is all about transparency. The purpose of this question was if
If we
this
contact you.
committee
and your information.
has
Okay.
reviewed land, and if the subcommittee, land committee says, we want to go approach that person, and the landowner, and this committee agrees to that, this is the process. They would approach the person, they would ask if they were interested in selling. If they were interested in selling, the SBC would request a site walkthrough and complete a basic survey if the information is not already available. I'm not sure how that's scary.
So
That's
it's an
very
if
transparent.
then statement as opposed to two separate things,
So
activities.
make the then.
No,
What
so
if-
I
what
think
if-
this last sentence, Phil, it follows up on the previous sentence.
It does.
If we privately contact you, then the landowner is interested in selling. Right, so this follows that, and I think I was looking at it as two different things. We'd contact you if we were interested in notice a piece of property. If you were interested in selling, come to us, and they're not. It's connected to the previous sentence.
So the question is, will landowners be approached if their land has been identified as a potential site for a new school? So I guess I'm wondering, was that really a question? Or is that just one of our questions? Because I'm wondering,
Why do we need this?
Because it came up while it was still at the Board of Ed and before we formed this committee. We had residents contacting our office being told their property was going to be taken by eminent domain, which is absolutely incorrect. And was never discussed ever, at least not in public meetings, in any conversations out of mine or Phil's office. So I don't know where it came from, but it was a valid concern in our community. And I think that's where the question comes from, is trying to address that.
oh,
That people are asking those questions, will landowners be identified?
And those were properties with homes on them. So they
Right.
were
We heard
concerned.
that and people came in public meetings and asked those very questions, and they suddenly had concern that the schools were, looking at their property.
right. So can we answer it like within this committee by saying that's not this committee's intent, is to identify properties that already have homes on it? If that was really the question,
Is that true?
Right.
I don't know.
I think the answer is, I think the first sentence is
don't wanna
correct. The rest of it is
kick-
we haven't made a decision on where we're going with this, so we don't, that has yet to be identified.
So I think we should strike that. This is just my suggestion. If the committee agrees, I think we should strike this, bring it back to the subcommittee to do a little more research. I think, Erica, if the issue is the fact that if we as a committee identify a property that has a house on it, are we gonna, as a committee, are we gonna recommend that we build a school on it?
No.
I'm not going to.
I disagree. No.
Oh, if
someone
someone's
has a house,
wanting to sell it?
hold on.
Mm.
The question is not about that. We're not talking about eminent domain.
Not at all.
If someone has 50 acres with a house on it and they want to sell and they don't care if you tear their house down and they want to know the process, we don't care if it has a house on it. If they're willing to sell it and they're okay with it, what we're saying is we're not going to, we can't legally take your house from eminent domain. But I'm going to go back and say this question still is not about that. We are trying to be this. Listen, there's a billion questions that were part of this process. What you see in front of you is significantly shortened. This question, the essence of what this question is trying to get to is, if this committee identifies land, what is the process? Do I need to approach them? Will they approach me? And it needs to be very clear for the committee. If Phil Stevens is approached because I have 50 acres in town, everybody in town should know what that process is. They should know that they will be approached by the school building committee, whether it's a renovation or new, it's an addition to a property or not. Then the SBC would then initiate a site walkthrough if the person was interested in selling, and you would complete a basic survey. It's like you're walking steps, you're taking steps, and it's trying to clarify what those steps are.
So
Maybe it's the problem is the question.
The question, that's what I was just gonna say, could the question be different?
Yes.
So that
I
it
think-
matches the answer. I would
Yeah,
ask the committee to revisit that question before we include it.
Just strike the whole thing and revisit it.
Yeah, I think, Phil, to your point, it sounds like it needs to be stated as to what the process is. So maybe, like Erica suggested, that just the question, because the way the question is worded, it's kind of scary. Like, am I
Take out
going to
that
get
for a new school then? Take out for a new school.
But I think I understand better now what the answer goes with. I just don't think it necessarily matches the question. You want to get at what would the process be if
Correct.
land is identified?
Exactly. If land is identified for as land for sale or land, something like that.
Okay, I'm going to ask that. Listen, this is why you have a subcommittee, but it's also, we've already had this conversation. So if you don't like this, you need to send what you want the question to be.
Okay.
Because we've already done a ton of work on this. So if you want a specific question in there, email it to me, email it to Ann. I think Gary's stepping back from that committee, but you will need to say what you want on here. And that's why I say, if you wait to do this and try and edit these live now, this is never going to get published.
The other thing is, I think we need to make it clear too, that if someone does have land, they can approach Phil or someone
No,
related.
don't approach me.
No, no.
No.
Catherine, would they approach? Who would they approach?
Sure.
As part of the process, who should they approach?
Could you put the email on there, the SBC email?
Our committee.
Oh, okay, the committee. Okay, the email's a good idea. Because they may be willing to sell and we just don't know about them. To approach them.
Well, I might agree. I have better context of where the committee was coming from with this question now. And I don't think you were looking for advertising for or against, but just describing the process.
Mhm.
Okay, Peter, which one you gonna start?
I have so many questions about this that I'm going to move that we table action on this tonight till we can get more input to the committee.
Is there a motion on the table to move this approval until our next building committee?
I'm moving that we table action till our next meeting, next scheduled meeting, so we can all get input. Like Phil says, we should just send him what we think are appropriate additions, deletions, and edits, because we'll be here all night.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second for discussion purposes.
Okay, so I guess, do we vote on this if we're tabling it?
You need
Yes.
discuss, you just have to have a
Discussion to table.
discussion first.
I'm okay tabling this so long as there's actually going to be feedback going back. I think what I'm hearing is that nothing went back to them after the committee received these and we put them on the table before. So if we have concerns and we don't want to discuss it as an entire committee, that people send that feedback back to the committee.
And that would be to the SBC email, or would that come, how would that come?
No, I mean, they can email me. If anybody on this committee, and this is why we sent it ahead of time, if you have feedback on any of these items, I think it's important that the committee consider it. It doesn't mean that the edits are going to be done in some, right? If the committee decides no, the person can challenge it in this format. But I think if you want to have an FAQ page that has answers on it, some of those answers are going to be real and they're going to be scary. And so we have to remember that as we answer these questions. And we did our best to be factual based upon the information that we have from different groups.
Any other discussion on tabling this till our next meeting? I think the understanding would be that if we table it, right, that we would get some feedback that we can present to the committee meeting next week with suggested edits. Right, Phil? Or you want?
That is correct, yes. So again, the committee did the work and brought it here. And so if you want changes to it, I think you need to add the suggestions in. Because obviously we wouldn't bring it to you if we didn't think if we thought it needed edits.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Is there, how about we take a vote? So all in favor to table this until our next meeting? Say aye.
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 Any nays?
One.
Abstentions? Okay, so we'll table this approval to our next committee meeting, which will be July 7th, I believe, right?
Brianna Ann was the net of the, thank you.
Okay, so do you want to move on into the agenda? Thank you for sharing.
Hold on, sorry, Catherine. Now that it's shot down, which is fine, can we put a deadline on this? So, because if you want the subcommittee to meet and have information back to you, we need to know when you're going to respond to us. because we then have to set an agenda to meet and talk about it and then make revisions. So are
Is-
you putting a
Is it
deadline on?
is it reasonable to ask for comments and edits by next Wednesday?
Sure.
I agree with that. We've had it for a week already.
Then we have a week to work on it after that.
Okay, so let's go down to new business. So what's on the agenda is board comments, school building tours. So Mr. Stevens was nice enough to take multiple sessions, multiple phases of touring both hall and center school for the committee members. From my tour that I got, I thought it was very successful, and I've toured both buildings many times before, just from my kids being in school and the times that I've toured it before. And I thought this one was actually very informational with just getting information more about the school program and how the buildings are currently being used. So my feedback is that it was a different perspective for me, and I gained a lot of information about the program and how the classrooms are being used and what type of services are also coming through Hall School. So I don't know if anybody else that toured the building had any feedback or comments you wanted to share, but here's our opportunity to comment on those tours.
So I will. I'll thank Phil for opening multiple opportunities. So he certainly gave a lot of time to allow us all to go in small groups. I too, like you, Catherine, have been in both buildings multiple times. You look at it from a different lens when you're looking at it as part of a school building committee and what things look like and the purpose they're serving. So it was a little eye-opening in some areas that as a parent, you may not have been in, or as a member of Board of Education where you've looked at different areas and aspects of the school. So there's a lot of unused space at Hall School, but not because they're not trying to use it utilize it in the right way, but because they're just spaces that aren't big enough for a classroom. And it was definitely, we put together multiple additions of buildings over there. And so they can't all be used in the way we might if we had a renovated to new school or a new school. We would look at the spaces very different. So just really taking the time to look at the spaces and how they're used was kind of eye-opening.
Thank you. Anyone else have some feedback to share?
Sure. Okay, I'm on. I wasn't sure if I was muted or not. The one thing that I observed, particularly with Hall School, was the lack of foresight and how some of the additions were planned, and trying to recognize future needs, which is always a challenge, no matter how you look at it. It was somewhat disappointing to see the hodgepodge of spaces surrounding the original school. But I think it's just a function of the various iterations of school building committees over the decades. I think there's an approach that could work with Hall School. I need to flesh it out a little bit and hopefully have a presentation for this committee at a reasonably close to current meeting in the future. I'm not going to put it off till the end of summer, but I do have a scheme in mind that has possibilities. And what I did get from Mr. Diamantis with one of my questions was that we could work with the Hall School property as long as we can provide the facilities that would be required. So that's going to lead to something that I want to see on a future agenda.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're focusing on the tour comments right now, but just if I can just add to your last comment, I think the land is going to be one of the difficult criteria that the state is going to require us to have if we try to utilize Hall. Unless some mysterious land shows up and we can meet our minimum acreage requirement at Hall, I'm not sure, but Ralph, we're certainly open to hear what kind of out of the box scenarios you have.
I'm not
So thank you.
convinced of the 19 acres required for that school. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I did
Well,
not get that from Costas.
Well, he didn't do the calculation. It was done previously by the Fryer studies. So let's move on to the other comments for the people that got a tour of the building. Any feedback, Brianna or Erica? What did you guys think?
I was not able to attend.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Anne?
I could not envision any future at Hall on the tour. I just couldn't see how we could take that space and make it into a pre-K through 8 state-of-the-art school. So that's it. That's what I came out of it with.
Anybody else? Brianna? So you were there.
Well, I have been there in the parental capacity many times at both of those schools, and actually as a student at both of those schools under the current construction that they have. And so, right, after all of the listening we've done, and as a parent, I have looked at all of the options Phil has presented over the last few years. And listening to Costa has made it pretty clear to me what I think is probably best for our students. I did want to make a couple of comments which had to do with the swing space and whether or not we will need portable classrooms. One of the things I worry about as far as renovating either of those beautiful buildings is what lies underneath. And that's something I'm always thinking about whenever we're talking about renovation or demolition. I don't want any of our children breathing things they shouldn't be breathing or being any kind of unsafe situations. Additionally, I don't want their education to be interrupted by something like that, or to be feeling odd or intruded upon by strangers on their land or in their space or out their window while they're trying to be in their classroom. And Mr. Clark had made a question, asked a question earlier about pre-K through 8 schools and how in the world that possibly works. I work in a school building. I've been in a school building for 18 years that services children who are 4 all the way up until 14. It's a pre-K to 8 school. And I can help you certainly with some insight as to how shared space can work with scheduling and how sometimes it doesn't work great. And staff has to really work together and administrators have to get really creative as far as how to share those things. But the other thing about Hall School, I think it wasn't made very clear to our visitors this evening that there are very specific codes regarding young children being on the bottom floor and having access to shared space. So things like where our cafeteria is placed at Hall School, the gymnasium, the library, those would all have to be adjusted appropriately so that those young children will be able to access them equally. And I remember Mr. Stevens was talking to us too about renovating at Center. And he gave us a scenario one time saying that if we had children in the school building learning and we were trying to renovate a certain section of it, in order for the students to get from one place to another. So for example, if they're near the upper parking lot in a classroom and they've got to get to the cafeteria, he told us that they may very well physically have to go outside the school building in any sort of weather and walk with their class around to come in a different entrance in order to even get to have lunch in the cafeteria. And as a mom and as an educator of young children, that just seemed to be asking way too much of our youngsters and our families as far as safety, honestly, and also just sort of taking kids way out of what they're used to in classrooms and their typical day. I know we've made a lot of changes to that because of COVID lately, and the administrators, staff, and students in Willington have done a fantastic job as far as communication and being as flexible as possible. But I wouldn't want to push kids outside of what they really need to do just because of something like wanting to do a renovation in a strange way, when we can do better for them. That's really what's important. We need to be able to do what's best for our children and make it minimally invasive, and also to make the most fiscally responsible decisions we can make. So those were just some of my thoughts. Mr. Clark, if you want to get in touch with me anytime about that pre-K to 8 thing, I'd be more than happy to have that conversation with you.
Thank you, Brianna.
Unmuting. Thank you very much. I'll do that. Maybe you can, I don't know, give me a call.
Sure thing.
All right, thank you. Were there any other comments about the school building tours? Peter, you had your chance. No.
It's okay.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to thank Phil for including the tour. I want to compliment him and his staff on what I thought was the excellent condition of both buildings inside and his adaptation of them. And I'll just respectfully disagree with Ralph. I actually was impressed with the foresight of our predecessors and the fact that we have this abundance of space in both buildings. I think that gives us potential options. And I'm pleased to hear from Mr. Dominius that nothing is precluded from us. But thank you, Phil. That was very helpful to me last week.
Thank you, everyone on the committee. And again, thank you, Phil, for taking the time to offer the tours on your own time, I have to say. So thank you for that. So moving on, this is a new business item that we were potentially going to be scheduling a meeting with one of the Hall Foundation members or a few of the Hall Foundation members. I'm not sure if she is on the call this
I don't
evening.
think that's on the agenda, Catherine.
Oh, the
I think we took that off.
Oh, we scratched that. Okay, I must have printed out.
I'm just making sure it's not me. I might be losing it.
I must have used an old printout. I'm sorry. Okay, well, we will schedule a meeting eventually. But there was a Hall. I thought one of the members, Alice Cassells, was going to be on the call tonight. I don't know if Alice is there, but we are going to be jumping into present to speak if she would like to say a few words. But moving on, suggestions for future agenda items. We've got the request for proposals for the owner project manager. That is going to be a future agenda item. I'm not sure that we're quite ready to look at some drafts of requests for proposals yet, but it will be on our future agenda item. Moving on to the present to speak. If there's anyone here that would like to speak, now is the time to do that. If you could raise your hand, just identify yourself and what your role is. If you're a parent, a teacher, a lawyer, a doctor, I don't know. But yes, so we'll open up the floor for that. Anyone that's not in video would like to speak?
You should be able to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Matt, if you.
Yeah, just a suggestion. Typically, when organizations put frequently asked questions on websites, they are frequently asked questions that lots of people ask. I think including issues such as land acquisition is not appropriate for a frequently asked questions page. I mean, anybody knows that. I think anybody would know that if they had land to sell, they would contact the town offices and inquire about it. I think that it seems to me that it's not. I was shocked. I'm like, what's that doing there? My goodness. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone else? Tanya?
You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I think on what Matt just said, I think almost the opposite of, well, I get it's not a frequently asked question. It may not be people are even aware that it's an option kind of question. where if you had those 50 acres and maybe you have them without a house on them or with whatever the case may be that you wanted to sell, they just may not be aware that it's even an option for them right now, that this is a thing, without having, as I think someone else mentioned, most of the voters and people that are frequently on and paying attention to these meetings, you know, maybe are above the 55 plus or whatever it was for the voting. The people who have kids in school and everything else, you know, maybe there's just not a lot of people with land that are aware that, well, it may not be a frequently asked question. It may be something that may be options that we don't even know about without putting it out there for people to know that it's something that they could do.
Thank you, Tanya. Anyone else present to speak? Going once. Twice, 3 times. Okay. So the next item, which is probably the most important item, is just highlighting our next meeting, which is July 7th, and adjournment. Do we have a motion on the table to adjourn the meeting?
Before adjournment, can I just say, I know for some that is a holiday week, that if we know ahead of time, we won't have a quorum. If folks could, maybe get to Catherine and let her know ahead of time, so we would know if that's not going to be a date able to meet. It's an issue for me, but rather than last minute, or we would have to cancel at the last minute if folks knew they weren't going to be in town and available. And to piggyback on that, you'll start to see some communications from the Selectman's office soon about going back to in-person meetings. And this is one of the committees that we will work to still offer in the hybrid form, as long as that's still an option for us. And that way we can still record the meetings and share them with as many folks as possible. So stay tuned. You'll probably be seeing information about us meeting in person in the future, very near future.
Thank you, Erica. So is July 7th a problem for any of the committee members that are here tonight? No, we're all good? Okay, so our next meeting will be July 7th. If there is a problem with attendance, please just let me know ahead of time, like Erica said, so we can have time to cancel the meeting. But let's take a motion for adjourning the meeting for tonight.
So
motion on the table. Erica, second? Nobody wants a second? Okay, Justin. All right, all in favor? Say aye.
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 Or any nays? Abstentions? All right, the meeting's adjourned. Everybody have a good night. It is 8:56, Brianna.